Yeah, we all have unresolved trauma and things that we have not, addressed. Maybe we don't even know are there. And people come along, and before you know it, you're feeling all those things. And it doesn't really, it's not directly connected to what they're doing. It's a switch that they flipped on in us.
Welcome to Conversation for the Soul. I'm going to have a soulful conversation today with my beautiful friend, April Novoa. Hi, April. Thank you for being here.
Linda, thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here with you today.
We've been trying to get this going for a while now, and like everything else, we had so many ideas of things we needed to talk about, and we get here and we're like, what were those things?
Yeah, we'll just we'll just let things take over, and I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
You were mentioning something before we hit the record button about, well, I'm just going to let you take it. It's about being in control, not being in control, releasing control.
Yeah. Yeah, so I had this thought yesterday because I'm watching people watch people. You know what I mean? I'm like observing. People watch the elections, watch the news, watch the wars, watch the this, watch the that. And I'm seeing a lot of just crazy emoting, like uncontrolled uh, rage, worry, fear, concern, all those things. And I thought to myself, well, what do I actually know to be a fact? Like, what do I know to be true? And how do you know anything for a fact? You have to kind of have some sort of experience with it, or you have to believe what you're hearing everywhere. So you have an experience, a tangible experience that you maybe see with your eyes, hear with your ears, touch, uh, or maybe you talk to someone that experienced it, you know. And then we have all these other things that we're not really privy to. Like we hear CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or name your alternative media, social media. You hear all of this, but it's not something that you experienced. It's not something you saw. It's not something that you talked to someone who experienced and saw it. It's something that you're getting from somebody you don't know necessarily. You weren't there. It was not experiential. But yet we get kind of like all wrapped up in the what that does to us on an emotional level. And then the mind tries to like create some sort of narrative around it. And we find ourselves like spinning out of control with everybody else. And I thought, what if we stopped and we practiced a little inquiry around what it is we know, we're aware of, or what we think we know, and how might that change the way that we feel about what's going on? Maybe I decide that I'm going to be undecided or uncertain about what I have not necessarily experienced directly. How is that going to impact how I'm feeling? And I thought, if I 90% of what I concern myself with, if I looked at it from a space of, I don't really know that, like I heard that, or maybe I'm aware of that, but I don't know it. And I decided that unless I know it for sure, I'm not going to get myself upset about it. 90% of my stress would immediately go away.
God, that's so true. That is so true. I always come back to The Untethered Soul. I love that book so much. And it really is a good, I don't want to say it's a lesson, but it's a good example of how to just step back and be the observer and not get attached to
Right.
things. It kind of goes in line with the four agreements too, how to not attach to things, how to not take things personal, and all of that. And when you're in the heat of it, that observer mode is it's hard to make that such a habit that that's your automatic go-to, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. We get really overtaken by the wave, by the associated emotions. And I was sharing before, I'd heard somebody, and I don't know who to attribute it to, talk about our emotions like being like children in the backseat of a van. You know, they're hungry, they're tired of being in the car. Are we there yet? And they're getting elevated and expressing their emotion. And you as the driver, the parent, have to, somehow acknowledge the feeling, help calm them down, meet their needs, right? But what happens with a lot of us is rather than do that, we just let them hop in the driver's seat and take the wheel. And that's just not really wise or skillful. And I thought about that yesterday because I was driving around and several near misses with people that were like pulling in front of me or in front of other people. And I thought those emotions are driving the car. And then from a broader perspective, I look at the world and all the unrest, and I think the emotions are driving the car. And we have to kind of parent ourselves and learn to acknowledge, yes, okay, you're feeling scared, you're feeling nervous. You don't, you heard this and someone's upset about that, and now you're upset about it. And can we acknowledge those feelings, give them the attention that they need, but at the same time parent ourselves and not let them get out in front of us? I think that's the necessary skill of our times, is to be able to not involve ourselves, like have an awareness. Yes, okay, they're bouncing around in the back seat, but not not let them take over in how we make decisions and how much anxiety and angst that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis. How can we somehow curtail that by using inquiry and saying, okay, now who's driving the car right now? Who's the one?
And the car analogy is interesting, and your example is interesting too, because I have noticed a heightened rage on the road. Like
Mhm.
we've all heard about road rage for years, but I have personally witnessed so much of it lately. It's like rampant everywhere,
Yeah.
which to me says, okay, that's a good barometer of what's going on with the collective. And is it rage, or is it uncertainty, or is it the fear, or is it all of the above that's driving the car right now for everybody? And I mean, we can check our emotions, but what do you do when you're confronted with that? And I'll give you an example. Of course, my husband took it personal the other day. He's at the checkout lane, and you're standing in line for self-checkout. And
Mhm.
he says to the guy in front of him, hey, that one's open. And the guy turns around and gets aggressive with them. And he's like, you don't talk to me. You don't tell me what to do, out of nowhere, and
Whoa.
would not let it go. And my husband's sitting there and everybody's watching him. And he's thinking, I'm going to get taken out by this guy in front of everybody for nothing. This is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. So he got sucked into what we call the projection field,
Oh, yeah.
where it's it's a way of bypassing uncomfortable feelings by, you know, putting them outward, like projecting them outward onto another person. So, the man in line might have a difficult relationship with a spouse or even a parent who is, maybe he feels is overbearing and being bossy and telling him what to do. And here comes along your husband innocently trying to help him. And the man lashes out, and it's nothing to do with your husband. And so, on top of just this emotional field that we're all kind of swimming around in, we have all this projection that takes place when there's really nothing necessarily going on outside of us as much as what's going on inside us. And I think, myself, and I'm not always perfect at it. Sometimes it gets away from me. Like I find myself when you find yourself in a state of like turmoil or upset, and it seems like it's um, unreasonable, or maybe you don't even think it's unreasonable at the moment. I mean, that man might have really felt that your husband was attacking him. Um, but can we slow down before we react and evaluate it and ask questions? And I think that's kind of what I'm really, I guess, hoping to get across, is that the practice of inquiry with everything is how we slow down. You know, if I'm feeling like I want to lash out at you, I'm triggered, like, is that really about you? It's not. It's about something going on inside of me. And if I can always turn it back on myself, not in a blaming way, but in a place, from a place of curiosity, like, why has that risen up in me? Then maybe I can keep the children in the back seat from not driving the car. Um, and also on the other hand, when you're the target of the projection, we go into that same story, don't we? Of, you know, you're attacking me.
Yeah,
Why are
my
you
husband, all he could think to do was, and it went on, and he was going to buy a laptop and walked by to go to the other counter, and the guy turns around and goes, "Oh, so now you're following me?" And my husband's like, "Yeah, I'm following you," and walked right by him. And then he
That's fun.
said some smart ass remark to him again, and my husband just goes, "Love you, brother."
Good
The
for
guy goes,
him.
"I don't love you."
It's like
Like,
this.
okay. I
Do you
mean,
hear that voice though? Like the voice sounds like a toddler.
yeah, oh yeah,
I don't.
totally. And his wife, apparently, I wasn't there to witness it. His wife was sitting there, "Come on, honey, let's go, honey, stop, honey." So I'm thinking it's something that's a regular occurrence, maybe with this gentleman.
Yeah, I think trauma, like I try to understand people. I can't always. I don't, if I can't, I'm not going to strain myself in trying
Yeah,
to.
bless you for trying. I'm to the point of giving up some days.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when they're throwing darts at you all the time to like stand there and try to like get them. But when it's so blatantly childish like that, you've got to wonder, like, gosh, something really significant happened at that stage of development that now he walks around behaving like a 4-year-old. You know what I mean? And there's so many people that are in that place, and we can have compassion for them, and not take what they're doing personal. But we also, I think it's important to have boundaries and keep a safe distance from the darts, because, and I've never seen it. I don't know about you, but like in the last 4 years, it's been like what's really going on in people is like coming to the surface. Like it's
Oh, yeah.
unavoidable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've gotten flipped off randomly for like no reason that I can think of. And I'm like, what is it about me that makes you want to flip me off? Like one that really stuck out in my head because I'm like, this makes no sense. I can't even think I did anything wrong. I was at an intersection and a guy was coming from the opposite direction to turn and he drives by me and flips me off. And I'm like, what was that for?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And it's
it really,
escalating. It's more
it's
like,
escalating. And I think it's important for people to understand, if at all possible, that it has nothing to do with anything they've done or who they
yeah.
are. That's easier said than done in the moment, because you're not expecting it. Like it's just like out of the blue, there are like daggers in your face, and you're like, whoa, what, you know?
Well, it triggers that fight or flight too, which I don't want that triggered anymore. I left the world where I had that on a daily basis and I'm not in that anymore. And then something like that aggressive happens and it's just like your body gets triggered
Oh
physically.
yeah. Yeah, we all have unresolved trauma and things that we have not, addressed. Maybe we don't even know are there. And people come along, and before you know it, you're feeling all those things. And it doesn't really it's not directly connected to what they're doing. It's something, it's a switch that they flipped on in us. And I feel like this is, as we go through this transition, which I really believe we're in a sort of uh an evolutionary moment, like it's sped up like unbelievably, where we're mutating into literally a different kind of species. um I think it will be that much more pronounced. And the skill required for that is this slowing down, this pausing, this self reflection, this inquiry of taking the time and really evaluating what it is, you know, we think we know. Like there was somebody in my life that I was sure was hated me. I mean, the way this person behaved towards me about a month and a half ago, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't like ever feel like I feel like, they would cut their arm off rather than be in the same room with me. Like, and then come to find out they're having marital issues. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know. So that goes back to, what do I know for sure? Do I know they hate me? Do I know I have a big booger on my nose and they're pointing it out? Do I know? Do I know? Like, and we can take that to our, the times where we run into people or we are with people on a personal basis, but we can also look at that in a collective way. Like, how do I know that what, this particular media outlet is saying is true? I don't. I don't know that's true. And I don't know that that person feels that way about me. There's so much that I don't know, that if I could get comfortable with the uncertainty and kind of just staying in my lane, so much less would actually impact me. Like how much are we letting through, and how much and if I am triggered, like I can also, why is that? What is that really connected to? Did I feel, made fun of in school or by a family member? Did I feel taken advantage of? Did I feel like things were taken from me? I mean, it's endless, the amount of things we go through that we are kind of lurking a little bit in the shadows that we don't even have any awareness of. And I think like that's part of the role of the other. There are no others, but that is part of the role of the character in our life, is to bring those things to the surface. And I think like if we'll watch carefully, that's happening not just on a personal level, but on a collective.
Let's play in a deep dive here, or a rabbit hole, or whatever you want to call it, for a moment. And you said what we know, we only know what we know for sure, what we know firsthand, or not what a media outlet tells us or whoever tells us. But we
Right.
have seen, and anymore, you don't even know if what you're seeing is real, because it could all be AI generated
Correct.
as AI keeps getting better and better. So we know there's unrest around the world. We know there's uprising around the world. We know there's planning and plotting
Mm.
against humanity around the world. Or do we know that? Or because we're bringing that into our awareness, are we then creating that? Or is it in this reality actually? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is a very convoluted thing because we are being played with a lot. I just saw a video the other day of Donald Trump and Kamala dancing and kissing each other and having a baby together, and I thought, okay, you
That
know,
was some good AI, let me tell you.
pretty good AI, and you gotta give props to those folks that put that together. Um, but we are being manipulated, and I think, I'm a human design specialist, and I'm also a Gene Keys guide. And one of the things that I teach is that the mind is not your authority. I don't teach it. I deliver that information. It's information that someone else was uh, courageous enough to channel. But that being said, I share that the mind is not the authority, that we have an internal guidance system that will let us know what is true, what is correct, what is aligned, what is resonant. And some people call that intuition. Some people call that inner knowing. Some people would call that the Holy Spirit. Some people would call that, you know, all kinds of things. There's all sorts of names for it, but it's a voice that doesn't use words. It's a knowing on the inside of us. And I feel like that is like the lamp unto our feet. That is the thing that gives us clarity. And so when you feel it in your gut as opposed to your mind, then I feel like you can trust that. But how many of us tap into that? I don't know. I would venture a guess that most people are tapped into those stories and the narratives of the mind. So we have to delineate, where is this information coming from, and then use our intuition to come up with what feels correct in our bodies for us. The mind, the personality, the persona in human design is the passenger in the body, and the body is the only thing that knows where it's going.
Mm,
So
wow.
again, you could compare the mind to the children in the back seat. If you let the mind be the decision maker, you're going to probably drive into a telephone pole. You're going to have a bad outcome. If you allow the body that already knows where it's going to be the what discerns what's true, so that whether that's the gut or the will or the emotional solar plexus or the spleen, whatever that is, it's going to be correct, but you have to know how to be able to tap into it. And I really believe that when we are children, when we're babies, when we first get here, we know how that works and we use it. And then we become conditioned away from trusting that. And we start to trust externalities. And those externalities are all projections and perceptions and opinions that are not necessarily ours. So in this day and age, when we are subject to so much convoluted and distorted messaging, I feel like we have to get really deeply in touch with on the inside into our bodies as to what's correct for us. So that's a very not simple explanation for it.
Yeah. And, because I'll feel it too. I trust my instincts a lot, but if I'm on social media too much and I'm seeing too much stuff going on, I'll start to doubt my feelings and
Mhm.
think that that external thing, well, perhaps that's something that's correct. And now I need to be paying attention to that. So you got to kind of step away from the external sources too and get out in nature and just decompress all that.
Yes, get back in touch with your body. Social media is really a kind of a dangerous place for the mind because it can go into all sorts of deep, dark crevices all over the place. And while there are some good things on social media and you make connections on social media, which is wonderful, there's also these traps that I think a lot of people are kind of walking into and getting lost in. And so grounding, getting out of nature, feeling what your own body feels like apart from other auras. What does this feel like? Because even if you're with a crowd of people, depending on how open you are aurically, you will take on the characteristics and feelings and emotions of those other people. So to be in a space where you can discern who you are, what your body feels like, how it feels different than everything else is a very, very smart idea. We are in some crazy, treacherous waters right now. Um,
Yeah, you're not kidding.
and I feel a lot of need to take time away. It's part of the reason I'm out in the woods, because so I can feel myself, so I can feel where I'm at, so I can orient where I'm at, because otherwise I get swept up in these waves that are not really mine to be swept up in. And it's hard.
Let's talk a little bit about how you've shifted your life because you're leaving, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I thought was suburbia, and now you have some acreage out in the middle of nowhere. So, and that was a very methodical decision on you and your husband's part. What brought you to that, and how does that play into everything that's going on in the world?
Well, I had a very rough experience. 4 or 5 years ago, I saw myself living in the downtown area of our city, buying an old house and being able to walk to restaurants and shops and see people and be around people. And that was kind of where the trajectory was going. And then, of course, I had the experience that I shared about a while back with you and Millie in the hospital. And I had this realization of this dualistic nature of our, not really real, I guess, a confirmation of the dualistic nature of our reality. And I understood better my place in it, and that I would benefit, and maybe other people would too, uh, being away from the noise, being away from the busyness, so that I could not only heal, but also to be able to tap in deeper to my own inner authority and who I am as a person. So the world looks very different to me than it looked 5 years ago. I feel like I see it in a much more clearly. I see, I'm a recovering codependent. And one thing that codependents do is they project a reality onto another person that is pleasing to them. And it's really a lie. It's not who they are. And I've done this all my life. It was a survival mechanism because I grew up in a home where there was a lot of substance abuse and abuse. And the strategy was to make reality look better than what it was. There are situations where it can't be hidden, and then there's situations where things are hidden and optics are important. And that's kind of like how you survive, is you tell yourself it's okay, it's all right, it's no big deal, we go forward, we ignore it, we don't acknowledge it, and that becomes a survival mechanism for a period of time, but it causes you a lot of trouble later in life, because then you don't see things for what they are. You see things for what you want them to be, and
Mhm.
you're not dealing in reality. And
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, I had reverted to that kind of pattern of projecting this ideal onto the world that wasn't necessarily accurate. And then I was shown in a very difficult and painful, extreme way that this is what it is. And I'm not saying that to be negative. I'm I'm saying it to be real. That there is this dualistic nature, there is good, and there is very clearly bad in this world. And you know, I don't necessarily think at this point where we are that the pendulum is like leaning towards more good as opposed to bad. I do feel like it's kind of, we're kind of in an entropic place right now where breakdown is happening. But breakdown precedes new birth. So it's part of a cycle. And so I accept that. So to make a long story short, when I understood that, I knew that for me to do what I needed to do here on this earth, I needed to heal. And to heal, I needed to be in a place where I could feel myself once again. And you know, kind of do some more work on myself. And on top of that, kind of be sequestered so that I could write unimpeded by outside influences. And also really wanted to get close to nature. I feel like nature is very healing for me, and gardening, and hopefully soon chickens and that sort of thing. So yes, I'm very rural right now. I'm very much like it. I feel like my nervous system is definitely healing. I won't say that I feel like everybody should run out and do that. It's hard. But for me, it's been a correct path. That was a very long answer to probably
No,
any.
and it was beautiful, beautifully, beautiful description of it's similar to how my husband and I decided we were just going to move into an RV in 2020 because we did not want to be in the city where everybody was, and it just wasn't working for us. So we came out to where we now have our place, and it's turning into a suburb of the city, but regardless, we still have a lot of nature around us, and it has really calmed us as well and made us feel more relaxed in our skin.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to do, it's not selfish to do what you need to do to heal your nervous system. If you're a very sensitive individual like myself, like you are, um, it's very important that you pay attention to what your body feels like when you're around certain situations as opposed to not in those situations, and that you manage that, because if you don't take care of that, you can't do what you're here to do, you know. And for me, that's, it's farming, writing, um, doing a little human design here and there, um, a little bit of body work. I mean, it's kind of all over the place. I'm just a Jill of all trades, but I can't do that effectively if my nervous system is not calm, if I'm taking in all of the emotions of the world, whether that be, by being in a really densely populated area or being on social media too much. So that part of self-care is like telling your inner child, like, okay, turn that off, it's enough. Step outside, let's go look at the flowers, let's go talk to the birds, let's put our feet on the ground, kind of reparenting yourself, as opposed to, you should do this and you should do that and you need to be worried about this and you need to be concerned about that. This whole idea of saving the world by being upset all the time and angry all the time,
Mm.
it really is not a skillful way to do this. I love what Mother Teresa said about this. She was asked, and it's cliche, I say it so much, but I just feel like she said something that is extremely important and very relevant, to today with what we're going through. She was asked to join in a anti-war protest back in, I don't know, it was the 60s, maybe 70s. And she said no. And they said, but you're so pro-peace. Like, why would you not want to join in? And she said, well, when you ask me to be part of a pro-peace rally, I'll be there. She was a woman that understood how energy works, and this resistance that we feel inside because we feel frightened or defensive is wears away at the mind and body. And so if you're in a situation where you're feeling like you need to be afraid or have resistance to external things, it might be a good time to take inventory and see where you can maybe change something about your life to where that's not penetrating you so consistently and so deeply all the time.
Do you ever think or get feelings on where you think the world is going? And are we going to spiral into more chaos going forward? Or what are your feelings on that?
Well, so I look at life as births and deaths, and that they're kind of really one door that leads to another all the time. So I would say that I think that yes, it will, before it becomes calm, it'll get more chaotic. And that it's like if you've ever had a baby, and maybe a lot of us can relate to that. But if you can't, just kind of imagine the sheer chaos before that occurs, to the body, to the emotions, to the people around that are trying to be of support, the heightened emotion of that situation. And then how at the moment you think it's never going to end and it's painful, and it's just almost unbearable. And I remember saying, I just want to go home now. I don't think I want to do this. It's a little late for that, but this is what I'm feeling, right? And I think a lot of us are like, I just want to go home now. I don't really want to do this. Um, but when that birth happens, it's like you just kind of are so caught up in the beauty of it, the beauty of the creation of the new world, that you don't remember all the pain and the suffering and the chaos. I feel like that's kind of where we're at. We're in a transitory phase right now where we're seeing a lot of, yes, I think, to kind of be a little bit less long-winded, yeah, I think it's going to get more chaotic before it calms down. But I feel like it's part of a birthing process of a new world, of a new way of doing life. It's we're going into what would be called an integral phase. We talked a little bit about a podcast that I had sent you by Paul Check, and he kept using the word integral, and that heralded to an area of study that I was involved in quite some time ago called integral theory, where mankind has had these different kind of, archaic, and then he goes into kind of like, there's different colors and you're kind of moving up the scale. And ultimately, we're in a postmodern phase right now, but we're getting ready to go into an integral phase. And what that means is that, okay, at some point, it's we're going to take what has worked with us, but we're going to discard the rest and leave it. So there's going to be a lot that goes away as a part of this process, but then there'll be some things that were valuable that we'll bring with us in the future, and hopefully a lot of that being the lessons that, in the last century that we've hopefully learned, but yeah.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think we can get there without, like, personally, I don't feel like there's going to be World War III. It just doesn't set with me. I don't feel it. But
Mhm.
there's so much talk about it everywhere you look. Do you
I think
think
in a
we're going to get
sense,
through this? Okay.
from a broader perspective, yes. When you're looking at it, if you can pan out and look at it from a broader perspective, yes. If we're looking at it from a myopic, up in your face kind of place, it seems endless and it seems unbearable. So I think I would really encourage people to kind of pan out, relax, take some deep breaths, slow down a lot. Use this as a time of like reflection, work on yourself. Try to not be so externally focused on what's going on around. As far as World War III, I think we have been in it. I think it's not a war of necessarily of tanks and guns. I mean, that certainly is happening, but it's not really that kind of war. It's a war for our soul. It's a deeper battle of fighting for our own awareness and our own growth and our own evolution as human beings. And we're winning. I think we're winning. It may not look like it, but I think we're winning. I think it's just, can you keep that broader perspective? Can we not um, be involved in everything going on and really practice inquiry around what it is when the mind is overtaking the process and creating the narratives and driving us all crazy.
I agree with you. You said it so eloquently. And then I think about um, the new awareness that has come in for me from Howdy McCoskey.
Yeah.
And then I think, is it just going to be an endless loop of this? Now, if you don't know who Howdy is, McCoskey, go look him up. But in a nutshell, and help me with this, April, he says we're on a planet that is run by the archons, by the elites, by this control group who feeds off of our energy. Well, we know a lot of that, but then it goes even deeper, and he believes that the God that we believe is running this world is not really the original God, the
Right.
God that is loving and generous and kind. It's basically a wolf in sheep's clothing here just to mess with us.
Yes, the Gnostics call that the demiurge, and then the would be the servants or the assistants to the demiurge would be the archonic forces, and the god of all would be I think it's Ag, agnosto theos, which is the unknown god. So there's, you know, a lot of the films that we've watched that have hinted towards this are things like The Matrix, and what was the one with Jim Carrey where he, you
Oh,
know,
yeah, yeah. The one
yeah,
that was being filmed in his own little world.
right. That this is sort of a simulation that is not run by something very nice because of the nature of suffering, and I tend to agree with that. Um, I do think the best we can do is to start by reducing our own suffering first and foremost, because it's the suffering that I think that these negative forces really feed on and enjoy it. Robert Monroe called it loosh. So it's a negative energy that human beings put out that actually feed and sustain negative forces that are kind of using us almost like an energy farm or like a batteries to keep going. So that being said, I like the framework with that. The Gnostic, they seems to put out a very good framework in terms of what really resonates for me as probably what all of this is. I'm not sure I'd use exactly the same words, but I feel like the myth, I saw another quote by Paul Check that a myth is never true, but it always is. Meaning that, when we think about myth, it doesn't really matter whether it happened in 3D. What matters is what does it mean? And so if I look at this information from that lens, I think to myself, the best I can do is reduce my suffering. And then once I've reduced my suffering, I will in turn reduce the suffering of those around me. And how do I reduce my suffering? And if suffering takes place as a construct of the mind, it's created in the mind. What is it that my mind is doing that's creating suffering for me? What can I do differently that decreases that suffering? And when I decrease my suffering, I will begin to decrease the suffering of those around me. And I think that is the highest service that we can give to the world. Um, but excellent book, lots of really good things to chew on. And then just don't, I feel like everybody needs to kind of like just stay uncertain, not in a scary way, in a way that's okay with uncertainty. What do I really know? Like, ask yourself, are they really thinking about that about me? Do they really believe that about me? Um, are they trying to get me? Like all of these little things that we can start to question about our own thoughts can reduce our suffering when we see them, when we're aware.
I love that. Reduce your suffering and then help to assist and alleviate it for others. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even if whether the myths are true or not are really irrelevant. Um, it's what do they mean to me personally? It really is all about you. I
It
mean,
is, and you can't go wrong just focusing on you and doing your own work.
yeah, yeah. It is the best gift you can give to the world.
Absolutely.
The absolute best gift. So, yeah.
Gosh, I had another thought there, now I just lost it. So, going forward, what's going on for April? What's coming up in the next 6 months?
Well, hopefully, we're finishing up some remodeling. Once we get that done, I've written 16 chapters of a fiction book.
Ooh,
I'd like to finish that. So I want to dive back into that. Um, and I don't know, like we'll see where the wind takes me, but probably, just continue to homestead get some chickens and goats, expand the usable space on the property. Hopefully, be much more successful with the garden this year. It was sad, but I'm learning. So,
I tell you what, gardening in the South is way different than gardening up north where I grew up.
ooh, it's probably a shorter season up there, I imagine, but you probably have better soil.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know. Is there any good soil anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, that's my philosophy is definitely and that's a subject for another time, but it's about being sustainability and keeping the mycelium network intact. So I do a method called no dig, and I'm learning. So I would not say I did it well this year, but I'm learning how to do it so that because the soil is so crucial. I mean, that's probably a whole other subject for a different podcast, but much life in there and there's so much communication there that and um so important to think about the earth, and if we can give back to her what she can give to us.
Have you seen the documentary, The Biggest Little Farm? I think
Yes.
something like that. Oh, so good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Everyone
there's so
go out and
much.
watch that. So good.
It is really good. There was one recently I drove all the way to another city to watch. Woody Harrelson uh, was one of the narrators, and the name is escaping me right now, but that's also very good. It dispels a lot of the lies that we're being told about climate change and how sustainable, if we stop monocropping and we start to practice more sustainable methods, tested methods, that we can restore the soil and really actually decrease a lot of the what bad carbon emissions, and we need carbon. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, really good documentary. If I can remember the name of it, I'll send it to you. But
Just
it was,
like we need fat and we need cholesterol for our brain, and all these things that we were told were taboo are actually good for us.
yes, I think it's important, like, you know, if the more popular an opinion or the more it's put out there, in the media, question it, question everything. Like, I encourage inquiry, not just around your own thoughts and feelings, but also about what you're being told about everything. And generally, you will find that it's quite the opposite of what you thought. And that there's things that we're being told are not great for us. And of course, I'm not a doctor and I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you know, read books, do your research, check it out, read about it. Get information from multiple sources. One of the things that I definitely practiced was listening to people that I typically wouldn't listen to, just to kind of have an idea of what the various opinions are, and then see what sits well with you in your body, not your mind, in your body, and then you have a pretty good idea of your direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. New thing out there that's some kind of monkey thing going on.
Yeah, somebody said just take out the K and you'll know what it's about.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's
Mhm.
perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, got to get all jabbed up for that one now.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, we have to learn to individuate, and that's part of the issue is that, we have this herd consciousness, and there was a documentary I watched a while back about the early indigenous peoples, and one of the ways that they hunted buffalo was they capitalized on their fear, and they would get them running and run them right off a cliff where they would fall to their deaths.
I've heard that.
Yep. And I feel like we are really not much better about that. If we can be, that's the title of my book, is Love Is, Fear Is Not, because fear, which is manufactured in the mind, the buffalo had a story. Buffalo is the size of bigger than a Volkswagen bug. I mean, they're huge animals. They could, if they understood their size, they could turn around and like take out a horse and its rider easy. But the fear takes over, and then they make really not wise decisions. And if you have a herd that's doing it, that kind of spreads almost like a virus. and they all go over the cliff, and we're not much better in that way. We can be activated that same way. So when you hear something that maybe tries to stir fear in you, really stop and look at that, slow down, really sit with it. Don't make quick decisions. Take your time, think it over. No, don't think it over, sit with it. Don't let your mind get involved in it. How does that feel in your body? Does that feel right? Does that feel right for you? Not just because everybody else says it feels right for them does not necessarily mean that it's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been beautiful, and I've been watching in the background, hoping Sasquatch would come and
I know.
appearance, but I haven't seen him, so darn it.
Well, I got a flock of chickens this morning, but
Wow.
they just trespassed right through our property. I don't know where they came from or where they were going, but
And at least leave you some
um,
eggs as a
I
thank you.
know. Well, it was a rooster leading the pack, so
Gotcha.
yeah. And there were ducks with him. He was leading ducks and chickens. It was really
That's
something.
funny. That's
I
funny.
know.
I
It
love
was
it.
been an interesting day.
Oh, awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here so much. April, your wisdom is so deep and so vast, and you are quite the Renaissance woman, let me tell you.
Thank you so much. That is an enormous compliment, and I'm so grateful to you. And I appreciate your wisdom and input and reflection and just your enormous heart to open this up for people. Thank you, Linda.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
you.
my dear. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Bye bye.